Hello everyone, today we'll be creating a basic CI/CD pipeline which will build a Docker image for this application which will be hosting on Azure repos. So the CI part, that is continuous integration part, will be taken care of by Azure DevOps portal, and then the CD part, that is continuous delivery, will be taken care of by ArgoCD, which will make sure it is deployed on K3S. So the workflow will be like this. We will be having a source repo where we will contain the source code files for this application. Once a change is detected in this repo, it will trigger a pipeline which will build the Docker image for this application and push it to Azure Container Registry. Once the Docker image is built, we will have another repo which will contain the K3S manifest to deploy this application on K3S. So we'll pull down that repo, make the according changes where we will change the Docker image version on the deployment file, and then we'll push it to that repo. So the K3S manifest repo will be continuously monitored by ArgoCD, which will detect once change is happening. It will pull down that change and apply it accordingly. This will be a very basic CI/CD pipeline, since it will not contain any static analysis or container image scanning tools that are deployed in the CI/CD pipeline. We will be learning on how to set up ArgoCD and get a basic CI/CD pipeline working, so that we can just change the source code and push it to the repo, and we can get the new changes ready on the K3S cluster. Before starting, the prerequisites will be an Azure account. Once you get your Azure account, we have to set up an organization on Azure DevOps portal, which will be using to host Azure repos and will be creating pipelines on it. After that, you have to set up a K3S cluster. If you need more information on setting up the K3S cluster, you can refer to one of my previous videos here. Now let's move on to the actual part of the video. I'll provide the links on how to set up the Azure DevOps portal in the description below. First, we have to set up the source code repo. For that, click on create new project. Give the project name as Heaven. We'll keep it in public. If you cannot turn on the public option in the visibility, you need to enable some settings before you click on this option. So for that, go to this URL. As always, I'll provide it in the description below, and you will have to go to your organization settings and turn on the allow public projects security policies. Now you can change to public. Now click create. So this is the overall project structure in Azure DevOps. The two important things that we'll be requiring is Azure repos and Azure pipelines. So this is where all the process related to building the Docker images and pushing it to Azure Container Registry will happen. So we'll set up the source code repo. For that, we'll first import the repo. Go to the GitHub page of Heaven blog. Get the URL of this repo and paste it here. We do not need any authentication since it is a public repo. So we'll click on import. Wait for the process to complete. Now we have successfully imported the repo. Next, we'll need to create the other repo where we'll host the manifest files for this application. For that, navigate to my repository where I hosted the manifest files for this application. You can find more details about how to host this application on K3S on one of my previous videos here. So this is my repo where I have all the files that is manifest for deploying this application. So copy the URL of this repo, go to the home page and click on new project. We can name this as Heaven K3S manifest. We'll keep this as public. Click on create. Now we again go to Azure repos, click on import and paste the URL that we copied. Click on import. Now we have successfully imported also the manifest files. Now the next step would be to create the pipeline, but before that we have to set up an self-hosted agent where the pipelines will be running. You can use the agents that are hosted on Microsoft, but I prefer setting up my own agents. So for that, go on to project settings, click on agent pools and click on add pool. So for this, I'll keep it as self-hosted and I'll keep the new name as DO, since I'll be running this agent on DigitalOcean droplets, and click on grant access permission to all pipelines. Click on create, click on DO. If you click on agents, click on new agent and then copy the URL. So this will provide a tar file, and note the operating system that you are using. So I'll be using Linux, so I'll be going with this guide. After copying the URL, SSH into your machine. So I'll quickly do that. After logging into a machine, make sure you create a normal user, since the agent will be giving an error message if you run the agent on a root user. So I'll quickly create a normal user. So user add -m, name of the user. Change the password of the user by using passwd. Switch into that user by using this command. Now you can set up the agent. So make a directory here, name agent, cd into that agent. Now you can duplicate the file that we copied earlier. I'll quickly install duplicate here. So since I'm using Fedora, I'll use the dnf command. Okay, so we have to also add the user errand to the sudoers group. So for that, user mod -ag wheel errand. Now we do that again. Now we do the duplicate command again. Once the file is downloaded, you can see that the file is present here. I'll copy that file to the agent directory. Move into the agent directory. Unzip it by using tar-xf and the file name will ls, and we can see a lot of files here. So the first file that we need to run is config.sh. So I'll run it by using /config.sh. Press enter, and we can see that our error is dependencies missing from .NET 6. So to install the latest .NET runtime on Fedora, we can use the guide here. So I'll link the appropriate guides for the Ubuntu based distros in the description below. So to install the latest SDK, you can use the following command here. After installing, run the config.sh file again. So we have to accept the license agreements. So press Y and enter. So we have to enter the server URL. So the server URL will be dev.azure.com/ the organization name that you have created in the initial process of setting up the Azure DevOps portal. So I'll enter mine and press enter. So we have to enter https:// in front of the URL. After that, we have to enter an authentication type. It says press enter for personal access token. So we'll press enter. We have to create the personal access token on the Azure DevOps portal. So to do that, click on this icon here that says user settings and click on personal access tokens. I have already created some tokens here. Click on new token. Give a name for this token. I'll give it DO token. For simplicity, I'll give it full access and we'll keep the expiration as 30 days. Click on create. Copy this token and paste it on the terminal. Press enter. So it's asking for the name of the agent pool. We gave the name of DO for the agent pool earlier, and the agent name that we can choose, I'll keep it as Fedora DO. So it has successfully added the agent and asking to enter the work folder. I'll simply press enter for defaults. So now the config.sh file is done. Now we have to run the run.sh file. So for that, /run.sh. Now we are connected to the servers and listening for jobs. So here on we have to just mention the pool name in the pipelines file and it will be allocated to this machine here. So now let's create the pipelines file. Before we move on to other processes, we have to install also Docker on this agent so that it can run Docker related tasks. So to install Docker on Fedora, first we have to uninstall old versions that may be installed on the machine. So I'll copy and paste that command here. Enter the sudo password. Next we can choose one of the methods present here. I'll go with the convenience scripts for keeping it simple. So first we have to get the file here. Next we have to run the file by using sudo. Wait for the process to complete. Once Docker is installed, we have to add the current user to the Docker group so that we can run commands without using sudo. For that, sudo usermod -ag docker group and the user. After adding, log out and log in. So exit out of the machine and we'll log in again. Switch to the normal user. Now let's type docker info. We can see that the Docker daemon is not running. We'll start the daemon by sudo systemctl start docker, enter the sudo password. Now let's try the command again. We can see we get the information about the Docker. Now let's move on to create the pipeline. To create the pipeline, navigate to the home page and click on your source code repo. Go to Azure repos, go to pipelines, click on create pipeline. Here we have to choose the location of the source code. We have it on Azure repos kit and click on the source code, click on the repo, and we have to create a pipeline that builds and pushes an image to the Azure Container Registry. So click on this option. So here I can see an Azure subscription that is linked to my account, that is my Azure account. If you do not see an subscription here and you get an error like you don't appear to have an active subscription, you can go on to this link here and follow these steps to make sure that you don't get that error. Once you solve that error, click on the subscription and click on continue. Now you have to sign in again so that Azure DevOps portal can create a service connection to your Azure account. So before we do that, we have to create a Azure Container Registry on our Azure portal. For that, navigate to the Azure portal, search for Azure Container Registry, click on Container Registries, click on Create Container Registry, select the subscription and select a resource group. If you don't have any, click on Create New and give a name for that. I'll keep it as Heaven, click on OK and enter the registry name. I'll keep it as Warhammer. I'll keep the location as Central India and pricing plan as standard. You can choose basic, but if you need your registry to be public and anonymous access to be enabled, you have to keep it on standard. Next, go to networking. Here you can change anything. So we'll click on review and create. Click on create. After the container registry is created, now we'll create the pipeline again. So click on the subscription, click on continue and sign in again. After you sign in, it will ask for the container registry and we click on the registry that we created earlier. You can keep the image name as you want and we have to specify the Docker file where it is present. So we'll keep it as it is. We'll click on validate and configure. Okay, so it has provided us with a basic pipeline. We can use this pipeline as it is, but I like to make some few changes here. So first of all, we have to change the pool. So here just mention name and then the name of the pool that we created earlier, that is DO. We don't need this one since it won't be using Microsoft hosted agents. Now this pipeline, it only does the job of creating the Docker image and pushing it to the Azure Container Registry. But in our case, we need to also change the deployment file of K3S and change the image name or the image version in it. So for example, go on to the manifest project, click on Azure repos and click on deploy file here. Here, every time we build the image, this part of the section will change according to the commit where the pipeline is running. Also we need to change this section here, so we'll change that here right now. The Azure Container Registry URL will be like this. So warhammer.azurecr.io/image name and the version. So I'll keep this as a random number here. Moving forward, it will be automatically changed by the pipeline that we'll be creating. So click on commit and let the message be default. Click on commit. Okay, so after we build and push the Docker image, we have to get the version of the Docker image and replace it with this section here. So we'll have to include some code for that in the pipeline. For that, we have to also get this repo in here. The code for that is, so we include the repositories that we want to clone. This is the alias, like we can use this name again in this pipeline anywhere else and it will refer to this repository. So it is the type of Git and we pull the main branch from there. So this is the actual URL of the repository. So we can get that by going into the repository, click on repos and click on clone. So we can get that here. We can obviously omit the starting URL since it is in the same organization. We just need to specify the later part of the URL. So we specify that and then we need to change the stages section. So I'll replace this entire content. We will check out two repositories in this pipeline. So the location of the Docker file will change, that is under the heaven directory under Docker file. So there will be multiple tasks in this pipeline. So we'll first check out the source code repository that is using this step here and then we get the short commit ID of this which triggered the pipeline. Once we get the short commit ID, we will use it to create the Docker image like heaven : and then the short commit ID. So for first we need to build the Docker image. We provide all the necessary parameters for that and then we give the tags as short commit ID. So after that we have to check out manifest repo. Next we have to set up the pipeline to run git commands. So for that I have used this guide which tells on how to enable the permissions and also set up the username and user email. I have used the steps here, like we first get the short commit ID to use that to replace this section. So after we get the short commit ID, so this is the pre-built variable in Azure pipelines which contains the commit ID of which triggered this build. Next we move on to this directory. Since we have cloned two repositories, one is the source code repository and another one is this manifest repository, so it will be in respective directories. So we'll move on to this directory. Use the command sed to replace this section with the commit ID that we got earlier, that is short commit ID. We replace the short commit ID and the file is heavendeploy.yaml. We add the files, commit the changes and push it to the origin. We'll click on save, keep the message as default, click on save. Now the pipeline is ready and we can click on the pipeline and run it. So we don't have any changes to do here, so click on run. Let's watch the logs. You may get a pop-up like allow this pipeline to access this repo. So click on that and allow it. So let's click on build. Yes, we can see the pop-up here. So click on view and first one is to access the agent pool. Click on permit and also the other repo. Click on permit. Now the job will start running and it will be run on our agent that we set up earlier. So for that we can see, make sure that you run this file before clicking on the run pipeline. So we can see that the job is running and we got some error here. We can see that the git is not installed in our agent. Let's quickly install that. Run the agent again. Now let's run the build again. So we can run rerun failed jobs. Click on yes. Let's go again to the build and check for logs. So the Docker tasks are running. Now if you see some error like this, git generic contribute permission to perform this action and the 403 error, you can copy the ID that is present here. So we have to go to that repo, click on project settings, click on repositories, click on repo, security and paste that user. Make sure that the contribute section is allowed. Now we have to run the build again. Now as you can see, all the steps in the pipeline has been executed successfully. So we'll go on to the Azure container registry to check if the images are uploaded correctly. So we'll click on repositories, click on the image name that is heaven, and then we can see that the latest commit ID that is present here. So also we now need to check the repo of the K3S manifest file. So we'll go there, click on Azure repos, and we have to check the deploy file. As you can see, the commit ID matches here, that is FA2E772, and we can see the Docker image is also edited in the same name. So next step will be to set up the ArgoCD on K3S cluster. So before we move on to installing ArgoCD on K3S cluster, make sure that you have installed Nginx Index controller, Metal LB, and set up NFS storage for the Heaven application to work. To get more info on this, refer to my previous video where I showed you how to set up these three so that you can deploy the Heaven application successfully. After all of this is set up, we can go on to install ArgoCD. Go to the official page of ArgoCD and copy these commands here. Make sure that you can connect to the cluster. Now paste that command here, press enter. Let's get all the pods on the ArgoCD namespace to check if ArgoCD is installed correctly. So kget pods in the namespace of ArgoCD. As you can see, all the pods are running. Now we have to make sure that the ArgoCD server is reachable. So if we get the service in ArgoCD, we have to access this server, and we can see that it is of the type cluster IP. So there are generally two options that I prefer. One is we have to change this IP to a load balancer IP so that we can access it using one of the IPs in our same network range using Metal LB. Another one, we port forward this service to our local machine. To change this IP to load balancer, we can use this command here. So here we change the service of ArgoCD server in the namespace of ArgoCD, and we change the type of to load balancer. Press enter. Now let's get the service again. As you can see, we have an external IP that is in the same network as my localhost machine, so I can access this using this IP. Otherwise, you can use the port forwarding method in Kubernetes like k port forward. So this is the port on our machine and this is the port of the service. So we'll access it on the port 80. Press enter. Okay, so we have to specify the namespace. So -n ArgoCD. So we can see the port forward is done. So we'll go to the browser, go to localhost port 8080. So we can see that the ArgoCD interface is visible. The username is admin and the password we can get it by getting the secret. So for that, open another tab and paste this command. So we get the Argos initial admin secret, and then we specify the field that we want, that is .data.password, and then we decrypt it in base64. So we got the password here. Copy that, paste it here, enter, and we can access the ArgoCD interface. Now let's create the application. So we'll give the application name as Heaven. Project will be default, and sync policy we have to set it at automatic so that we don't have to do anything. We can tick the prune resources and self-heal. This will make sure that the resources that are not defined in the Git are deleted. So we can keep rest as it is. Now let's paste the repository URL from where the K3S manifest will be continuously monitored. So for that, we have to go to the K3S manifest, and I have observed one thing. So the URL which you copy from here doesn't work on ArgoCD. Instead of that, we have to follow this particular structure like this one here. We have to enter the specific details like organization ID and then the project, which is Heaven K3S manifest. Heaven K3S manifest. Next, we'll leave the branches as head and we'll specify the path as dot, that is current directory. Specify the cluster URL. It will automatically detect the current Kubernetes cluster. We'll specify the namespace as default. List all, we can leave it as it is. Now let's click on create and let's see if the applications are created. Now we can see that the sync status is out of sync and it is currently provisioning all the resources to keep it in sync. These pods are currently failing due to the fact that the Postgres database is not yet started. So once it's started, this will reboot and then it will be fine. Okay, so we have another error here. Let's just delete this for now. We have to make sure that the Azure Container Registry is public and anonymous pull is enabled. So for that, use this command. We are using the Azure CLI and we have to change the container registry name, that is Warhammer in my case, and press enter. So we have enabled the anonymous pull and made it public. So we have to wait for some time. To check it, we need to go to settings, repositories, connect repo, and then we'll specify the repository URL like we specified earlier, and let's change all the details here. Name will keep it at heaven, we'll keep it as HTTPS, project will be default and we don't need username and password. All we can leave it as it is. Click on connect. We can see that the connection is successful. Click here and click create application. We do the same process again. So we can check the status of the pod, like it will be pulling the image from the registry. So we'll wait for that. Okay, so we can see that all the pods are running. So I also created a ingress for these pods, that is, so to get the ingress, get ingress. So I have mentioned this URL. So make sure that you add this address to your host file with this domain here. For example, you can see like this. Now we have to copy and paste this URL into the browser. So as you can see, the application is working fine. So default will be admin@admin.com and password will be password123. So once we have logged in, we can see the message that nobody has written anything yet, and you can click the new post button. To simulate one of the code changes, we'll change this sentence here and see if it reflects here. So for that, I'll clone the repository, navigate to the source code repository, click on repos and click on clone using SSH and copy the URL. Go to your terminal and say git clone and then the URL. Move into the directory. Now we'll move into the app directory, go into views, posts, and we can edit the index.html.erb. We can see that the content is written here. We'll change that and we'll add some simple text like, so let's save and exit this file, git add, git commit, and we'll say that more changes are added and we'll git push it. And let's see that builds getting triggered. So we'll go to the Azure DevOps portal, go to pipelines, click on the build, and we can see that the commit message is shown correctly. And let's wait for the build to finish successfully. We can see that the build has almost finished. Let's see if the manifest file has been changed. Click on manifest, go to repos, and we can see that the section has been changed here. Let's move on to application and let's see if it's picked up automatically. As we can see here, the latest changes has been pulled and we can see the new image that will be pulled. So we'll check that and we can see that the 08BB754 is being pulled. So let's check that and we can confirm that it's the same image that has been recently changed. We will create the pods that are required and delete all the other pods that are not required. So as we can see, it's working as intended. Now you can see it has almost changed, and let's try it again to access the interface. Let's give it some time to load. We can see that the content has been added successfully that we edited earlier. In one of the future videos, I'll be making this pipeline more suitable to real world, like adding static code analysis and container image scanning and multiple checks. Stay tuned for that. This is it for this video. If you found this video helpful, like, share and subscribe to this channel for more such videos. Thank you.